There is a strange kind of silence that sometimes sits behind a person's eyes. Not the silence of shyness or the quiet that comes from having nothing to say, but a deeper stillness, the kind that feels like someone has already wrestled with all the noise of the world and chosen, very carefully, what to keep and what to let go. I first noticed that kind of silence in a photograph. Not in person, not in some life-changing meeting, just a simple picture on a screen. A man standing on a red carpet, cameras flashing around him, lights blazing in the background, and yet, his expression was soft, calm, almost detached. He looked like someone who understood exactly where he was, what people wanted from him, and had quietly decided he would only give as much as his soul could afford. The headline said something like, "When the world chased spotlight, he chose silence." I remember staring at that line for longer than I expected. I shut my laptop, and that sentence came with me into the kitchen, into the shower, onto the bed that night. I kept thinking about it as if it were a riddle not about him, but about my own life. When the world chased spotlight, what exactly had I been chasing? It's funny how you can live years without really asking that question. You wake up, you do your job, you scroll through your phone, you respond to the unspoken rules around you. You try to be seen, to be liked, to be doing well. You don't call it chasing the spotlight because most of us never stand on a stage or under cameras. But in quieter ways, we chase the same thing. I did, at least. For a long time, I measured my days by the small flashes of attention they brought. A post shared, a compliment from my boss, a message that said, "You're amazing." Every bit of approval felt like a light turning on, proof that I existed in some visible way. If I'm honest, it started early. At school, good grades weren't just about learning, they were about standing out. At home, being praised felt like being loved. Somewhere along the line, those two wires got tangled in my mind. Attention became equal to worth. So, as an adult, I carried that old equation with me. I chose the job that sounded impressive when spoken at parties. I said yes to things because they might lead somewhere big. I worked late not only because it needed to be done, but because I liked the way people said, "You work so hard." I liked the way my name looked in email chains and group chats and event credits. I didn't call this chasing the spotlight. It just felt like living in the world. But it came with a quiet cost. It looked small from the outside. Just a missed dinner here, a postponed rest day there, another weekend cut in half. Inside, though, the cost was measured in something more subtle. A strange emptiness that appeared every time the lights turned off. Because attention is like a flash. It's bright for a second, it shows you the shape of your life, and then it goes out, and you're back in the dark with yourself. It took a while for me to notice what that darkness felt like. On days when no one praised my work, or when a post didn't do well, or when the message I hoped for never arrived, I felt hollow. Not disappointed in a simple, human way, but cracked open, as if something important had been taken from me. One night, years before that photograph, I remember sitting alone on my couch after a long work event. People had laughed at my jokes. My presentation had gone well. My phone was still buzzing with messages. "You were great. Loved your talk. So proud of you." It should have felt like a perfect evening. Instead, when I turned my phone to silent and the apartment grew quiet, I felt oddly unanchored, like a balloon that had been let go. Who am I, the thought came, when there is no audience? It was a small question, but it scared me. So I did what most of us do when something uncomfortable rises up. I distracted myself. I turned on a show. I scrolled through more noise. I filled that inner silence with outer sound. Years passed like that. I grew more visible, more successful. But at the same time, the distance between my public self and my private self kept widening. It was as if I was building a bright house made of glass for the world to see, but going home each night to a quiet, half-furnished room inside my own chest. Then came that photograph. There he was, surrounded by exactly what the world promises will make us feel alive. Cameras, lights, attention. And yet nothing in his face said, "Look at me." His eyes didn't seem to be fed by the crowd. If anything, he looked like he could walk away from it all and still be himself. It wasn't hero worship for me. I didn't know him personally, and I knew better than to build some perfect image of a stranger. But that one moment captured a question that had already been growing in me. Is it possible to live inside the noise of the world, and yet belong to silence? That night I sat with the question instead of escaping it. I left my phone in another room. I lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, breathing through a heaviness that felt like withdrawal. Without realizing it, I had been overdosing on being seen. Silence, at first, felt cruel. It brought everything I'd been postponing to the surface. The loneliness I had covered with busyness, the self-doubt I had hidden behind achievements, the unresolved grief I had pushed aside because there was no convenient time to feel it. But as the minutes turned into an hour, something else returned too. An older part of me, a simpler part. I remembered being a child, walking home from school alone, dragging my fingers along walls, kicking small stones, thinking my small thoughts. No one knew what I was thinking then. No one had to. There was a whole private world that existed even without witnesses, and it had felt enough. Somewhere along the line, I had traded that inner world for a brighter outer one. The days after that first long evening of silence didn't turn me into a sage. I didn't quit my job or run away to a mountain, but something in me had shifted just enough to create a crack in the old pattern. I started asking myself simple, inconvenient questions. Why am I posting this? Why am I saying yes to this project? Why does this compliment mean so much to me? What do I do when no one is watching, and how does that feel? The answers weren't always flattering. Sometimes I found that I wanted admiration more than I wanted genuine connection. I realized how easily I adjusted my opinions depending on who was in the room. I saw how quickly my mood rose and fell with each small piece of validation. This awareness hurt my pride, but it also opened a door. Because you cannot choose a different way of living until you see clearly the one you are already trapped in. Little by little, I began to experiment with a different rhythm, one that did not reject the world, but didn't worship it either. I started with small rituals of deliberate silence. I took walks without headphones. The first few days, my mind was an impatient child. It wanted noise, distraction, something to chew on. But as I kept walking, the edges of my thoughts softened. I began noticing small things. How a leaf twisted in the wind, the sound of distant traffic like a soft, urban ocean, the way my own footsteps sounded on different pavements. In those walks, no one saw me. No one knew what I was thinking. For a while, that made me itch. Then, surprisingly, it began to feel like freedom. I also began leaving my phone face down during meals, even when I was alone. I would sit with my food and actually taste it. Sometimes I wrote in a notebook before bed instead of scrolling. A few honest lines about how the day had really felt, beneath the highlight reel I would normally show others. The changes were quiet, almost invisible to the outside world. But inside, a different kind of attention was slowly being born. Not the kind that looks outward to see who is watching, but the kind that looks inward to see who is speaking. One evening after a long day at work, I sat by my window and watched the light drain out of the sky. My phone buzzed with messages from a group chat I belonged to. People were sharing updates, achievements, little victories. Each ping felt like a small tug. Come back, be seen, add something. For a moment, the old reflex kicked in. I picked up the phone, opened the chat, and saw the familiar dance of comparison begin in my mind. She's doing so well. He's further ahead than me. Maybe I should be working harder. Then another thought, quieter but steadier, rose up. Or maybe your life doesn't exist to be compared in real time. I put the phone down, let the messages sit there unanswered. I turned off the lamp, sat in the half-dark, listening to the soft hum of the fridge, the distant brakes of a bus, the occasional footsteps in the hallway. In that small pocket of nothing, I noticed something gentle. I did not feel like I was disappearing. For so long, it had felt like if I stepped away from the noise, I would somehow stop existing. As if my presence on screens, in conversations, in productivity, was the only thin thread keeping me tethered to life. But sitting there in my unremarkable apartment with no one watching me and nothing impressive happening, I felt present, completely, quietly. I realized that the spotlight is not just a physical thing. It is a mental posture. It is the place in our mind where we are always waiting for an audience, real or imagined. We practice reactions that no one has given yet. We rehearse explanations. We shape our choices according to how they will look from the outside, not how they will feel from the inside. Choosing silence, I understood, is not only about being in a quiet room. It is about gently stepping out of that inner theater. That doesn't mean abandoning our roles in the world. We still work, interact, create, share. But the motivation shifts. What once was done to be seen slowly becomes something we do because it feels true. I began testing this in small ways. At work, I tried speaking less in meetings where I knew I tended to dominate the conversation, not out of shyness, but out of a quiet curiosity. What happens if I do not fill every space? Will my value vanish? It didn't. Others spoke more. I listened deeper. I found that I didn't have to impress anyone to be useful. With friends, I experimented with being more honest and less polished. Instead of sharing only the interesting parts of my week, I allowed space for the ordinary. I felt tired. I was lonely on Tuesday. These didn't feel like spotlight moments, but they opened more real conversations than my usual stories of busyness. Sometimes I stepped back from gatherings or online spaces where I noticed my worst habits of comparison being triggered. Not as an act of superiority, but as an act of self-protection, like someone stepping out of bright lights that were starting to hurt their eyes. There were setbacks. I still got hooked by praise. I still found myself checking who had viewed or liked something I shared. Silence did not magically dissolve my ego. It simply gave me more chances to see it clearly and, when I could, smile at it with a bit more tenderness than judgment. One day, an acquaintance I hadn't seen in a while said to me, "You seem different lately, calmer. Did something happen?" I thought about giving some profound answer, but what came out was simple. "I think I just got tired of chasing things that disappear," I said. He nodded slowly, as if he knew exactly what I meant. It struck me then how common this quiet fatigue is. So many of us are worn out by the desperation to be visible, important, unforgettable. We rarely admit it because the chase is wrapped in the language of ambition, success, and progress. But under all of that, there is often a simple human ache, the fear of not being enough as we are. Silence, I realized, is one of the few places where that fear cannot easily hide. Because in silence, there is no one to impress. No instant feedback, no curated reflection of yourself, just the raw material of your own being, your thoughts, your habits, your restlessness, and your softness. At first, meeting yourself there can be uncomfortable. But if you stay, if you keep returning without trying to escape, something unexpected happens. You begin to make friends with the person you actually are, not the one you perform. Slowly, that friendship changes everything. It changes how you handle praise, because you no longer rely on it to define you. You can enjoy it without being addicted to it. It changes how you face criticism, because while it may sting, it doesn't feel like an annihilation. There is now a place inside you that knows your worth is not up for public vote. It changes how you see others in the spotlight. Instead of envying them or glorifying them, you can feel compassion for the weight of eyes on them, for the expectations, for the way their private self must struggle to breathe beneath all that brightness. It changes how you measure your days. Success stops being, "How much did people notice me?" and becomes, "How aligned was I with what matters to me?" Sometimes that leads to visible achievements. Sometimes it leads to quiet, invisible acts of care, of honesty, of presence. Over time, I noticed that the more comfortable I became with inner silence, the less needy I felt for outer noise. I still shared parts of my life. I still worked hard. I still enjoyed moments of being recognized. But I stopped organizing my entire existence around being seen. I began to understand something that had once only been a nice sentence. A meaningful life is not necessarily a noticeable one. Some of the deepest moments of growth in my life have happened when no one knew where I was or what I was doing. Sitting with grief in a small room, letting go of resentment quietly with no announcement, choosing kindness when there was no audience to applaud it, forgiving myself again and again for being human, not perfect. Those kinds of moments do not trend. They do not earn applause, but they change the texture of your being. As I look back now, the line from that photograph, when the world chased spotlight, he chose silence, no longer feels like a distant headline about someone else. It feels like a gentle invitation that had been waiting for me all along. Not an invitation to disappear, but to appear more fully to myself. To live in such a way that if all the external lights were switched off, if all the cameras were lowered, if all the screens went dark, there would still be a clear sense of who I am, what I value, and how I wish to move through this brief and mysterious life. Silence has not made my life smaller. It has made it deeper. I still step into busy rooms. I still speak up, create, connect. There are days when the old hunger for attention rises up again, asking to be fed. I don't scold it anymore. I recognize it as part of me that once believed love and visibility were the same thing. On those days, I return to simple practices: a quiet walk, a phone left behind, a few minutes of sitting with my breath, watching thoughts pass like cars on a distant road, a notebook page filled with unpolished honesty. In those small, repeated choices, I remember a truth that the world's noise often drowns out. You are not here to be endlessly consumed. You are here to live, to feel, to grow, to understand, to love. The spotlight may shine on you sometimes. Sometimes it will move away. Both are temporary. Both are irrelevant to the deeper work of your life. The real story is what happens in the quiet, the way you speak to yourself when no one is listening, the values you hold when no one is checking, the tenderness you extend to your own imperfect heart and to the hearts around you. In a world that constantly asks, "How visible are you?" there is quiet courage in asking instead, "How present am I to what truly matters?" That question does not need an audience. It only needs your honesty. And perhaps one day, someone will look at a simple photograph of you, not on a red carpet, not under flashing lights, but maybe sitting on a bench or by a window or walking down an ordinary street, and they will notice a certain stillness in your eyes. Not the stillness of emptiness, but the quiet of someone who has learned, gently and patiently, that a life rooted in inner silence can carry more meaning than any life lived only for the world's fleeting spotlight. In that moment, whether anyone else understands it or not, you will know. You chose, again and again, to belong not to the hunger for attention, but to the peaceful, enduring space inside you where you are already enough.